So I think probably my favourite ever interview, TV appearance of the Beatles, is with my hero Ken Dodd. Now, in the UK, everybody will know who Ken Dodd was. He was probably the funniest man to have ever lived in his country, and of course from Liverpool. And there's this wonderful television appearance, and it was done at the end of November 1963.
Well, what do you feel about the boys?
I think there's a wonderful style, actually, because they're different than me, because with them being Martians, they... A professor of archaeology at Nottingham University has discovered some tablets which say that the Beatles are definitely Martians.
Very key time in the Beatles' career, because this is obviously before they go to America for Ed Sullivan. Second album's just come out a few days before, and they're doing this promo scene at 6:30.
Boys, what do you think of Mr. Ken Dodd?
That's great.
He's marvellous.
He's a good man.
Lovely hair.
He's lovely hair. Hair is lovely.
Yeah. We got onto television, and when this interview happens, they are both rising stars, aren't they? Ken's probably a little bit higher than they are at that point. And so when you watch this interview, I think the Beatles are slightly overawed by him. And what's really difficult when you watch things like this, you know, which are 1963, is the Beatles relatively new, relatively, you know, beginning their careers. You've got a comedian there, Ken Dodd, who's probably a bit more established. He's quick-witted, he's great with the one-liner. And I think that the Beatles are both slightly overawed, but actually just love being in his company, because he will be one of the people they've watched and laughed at.
Oh yeah, you look at the way they just look at everything he says, and it is in awe. And really, Gay Byrne's there, and he's setting up Ken Dodd just to tell some jokes. And the others are they're just joining in every now and again. And you can see, the longer that goes on, the happier they are, and they throw themselves at. But you can tell they love this man.
Are you going to let them sing if you do take him into the group?
Oh yeah, he's got a great voice anyway.
Because we all do all their numbers. Actually, my granddad, he was sitting up all last night in bed going, "Twist and shout! Twist and shout!" He's hot water bottle as well. Oh, he do that. One night before he finished supper, he had 2 great big boiled onions, smothered in mustard. He was up all night singing, "Great balls of fire!"
And it is just sort of anarchic. I mean, it's perfect for Ken Dodd, because he's a comedian who's, I think he's something like 13 years older than John and Ringo, so he's a little bit older than them. But he's been in showbiz since the early 50s. Now, I know there was a very interesting conversation they had before they actually get onto the television interview. And they're in the dressing room, and the Beatles are talking to Ken. And he said, "We did a show with you once." He said, and Ken Dodd was thinking, "Oh, I don't remember that." And I think it's Paul was saying, go back a couple of years. 15th of October 1961, the Albany Cinema in Maghull, Liverpool. Charity do for the St John Ambulance. And Ken Dodd said, "Were you that crap band?" He said, "Yeah, you had us thrown off. We were supposed to do 2 sets, and at the interval we were told you're not going on again." He said, "Oh, you were terrible." And Paul said, "To be fair, we were." And it's about choosing your audience. So at this stage, you know, this is before they meet Brian Epstein. So they're still sort of in the leathers, rough, they're playing rock and roll. And the audience they're playing to is for a charity do. You know, it's for the best dressed and the wealthy to come out. Wrong audience for their rock and roll. And Doddy was the headline act, and he said to the organisers, "Don't let them go on again." He said they're going to ruin the whole night.
And there's a relationship there between the Beatles there, because when we look at that now, you know, to me now, they look like they've got very, very conservative haircuts. At the time, that was considered to be long hair, wasn't it? And
that was one of the complaints when they went to America. You know, it was the long hair. You know, hair over your collar. Even when I was going to secondary school in the 70s, you know, you couldn't have hair over the collar.
I once was sent home by a maths teacher because my hair was too long, and he told me to get it cut. I came back to school and I got whacked for not having it cut short enough.
And that's a problem you wish you had today?
That's a problem I wish I had today, yes, indeed. So the other thing about this is that the Beatles are seen as a great rock band, a great set of songwriters. You know, they're seen as one of the biggest bands on the planet. But their career started quite often in variety, and they would be on the same bill as Ken Dodd. And I think one of the things that this interview does, it bridges that cultural division between what used to be variety, which had its roots in music hall, and then what was going to be the rest of the 60s and the burgeoning media, television, film and popular music industries.
But also, that would have been the music that all the Beatles would have heard at home, because that's what parents listen to. You know, if you listen to the wireless and you only had the BBC had its radio monopoly, then that's what they would have heard.
Yeah.
It would have been music hall, it would have been variety. Yeah. So that wouldn't be alien to them. They were the generation that were then replacing it, but they grew up listening to it.
What about the sense of humour? I know that you carry out this study all over England about the different senses of humour in the north and in the south.
You boys, they throw different things in different parts of the country, don't they? No, they do. The different parts of the. I mean, you can tell a joke in Manchester and they don't get it in London. Really? They can't hear it.
And I know we're going to do another one of these, which is about the appearance with Morecambe and Wise, and that almost hits on the nail even more so, because on that one they end up with Striped Blazers and Boaters doing a song with the two comedians, which is basically saying to them, we're entertainers. We're not just songwriters, we're entertainers.
Well, of course, one of the discussions that they go on to have, Ken Dodd starts talking about a film script he's written for them. So obviously, thankfully, it was made up. But they talk about, you know, would you like to tell jokes? And they get involved with the humour. And of course, Ken Dodd's thrown in a place where he grew up, Knotty Ash, which a lot of people don't believe is a real place, but does exist.
It's where the jam butty mines are.
It's where the jam butty mines are, and the black pudding plantations. And then, I mean, George joins in on that, he's talking about the black puddings. And you can see them warming, and the ad-libs are coming in. And I think that the funniest one that almost stops everything was Lennon's line when they're talking about, you know, Ken, would you want to be in a rock band? And they talk about him being the fifth Beatle, which again is something that crops up a number of times. And he said, but I need something earthy as a name like Rock or Cliff. And the humour is brilliant just between them.
So was that before or after Lennon invited people to rattle their jewellery when they were in the posh seats?
This is just after.
Just after.
So the term Beatlemania has just been coined. You know, the second album has just come out. Cause again, they mentioned about why don't you let Ringo sing? And they said, we haven't got the new LP. And with the Beatles had come out, I think it's like 5 days before they did this. So they're just onto their second LP. They've done Royal Variety, they've been on television, they got #1 album. So in Britain they were still big. And on the same day with the Beatles came out, on American television they made their debut on, I think it was CBS News. And this should have been repeated, but of course the 22nd November 1963 was the day that JFK got assassinated. So this is a very important time for the Beatles. And here they are on television with a big comedy star. And I think one of the funny things, we said this when we were watching it, was how many Liverpool jokes are in there. Which
name-checking local places that actually most people outside Liverpool wouldn't know. Certainly nobody internationally would know any of these things.
No.
But you make it a rule, don't you, to get home to Liverpool as often as you can?
If I can, yes. Well, you know, for the air. Right, Joe. And of course, you know, as you know, Liverpool is a spa. Years ago, you see, I have such strong roots with Liverpool. It was one of my ancestors who actually discovered Liverpool, a man called Sir Dingle Jetty. He was the man who discovered the famous jam butty mines, not the ash, until one day, unfortunately, he fell into a jam vat. Jam vat. And expired, shouting the now familiar phrase, "Heavens preserve us."
I think he mentions Camel Head, which is obviously the shipbuilders.
Yeah.
Obviously, he mentioned Notty Ash. He mentioned Gattaca.
That's right.
And Gattaca is next to Woolton, where of course John grew up. But there's lots of sort of colloquialisms, there's lots of mentions of Scouse.
Yeah. So what this interview and piece does, it nails down their cultural roots in terms of their Liverpool cultural roots, and they obviously feel very happy about talking about that. And I don't know whether this is true or not, but it always seems to me that when entertainers are from Liverpool, they make something of the fact that they're from Liverpool. I couldn't imagine an entertainer who came from Preston making a big thing about Preston or Bristol or...
But of course there's a great tradition. Again, thinking back to the BBC Radio and what the Beatles would have grown up listening to.
Yeah.
You got your hero,
Arthur Askey. Arthur Askey, what a man.
What a man. From the Dingle. Very close to Ringo. Because you've got Tommy Hanley, he was huge, and Rob Wilton. And they're just the biggest ones. So there's a lot of Liverpool comedy that was on the radio, again, as they were growing up. So there's that kind of culture, and it's... did John Lennon say? We put it in Looking for Len, wasn't it? Liverpool people with a great sense of humour because they're in so much pain. And one of those things that comes out of being a working class place where there are struggles, your sense of humour is what gets you through. It's sometimes a defence mechanism, which I think is very Lennon. Of being an insecure person, he develops this persona because the Liverpool accent he develops. He didn't naturally have a Liverpool accent.
And do you know what, it's interesting at that time on the BBC, certainly post-war, and certainly probably up until the early 60s, quite often the only time you heard regional accents on the BBC was either in entertainment or comedy, and the rest of the BBC would be received pronunciation.
Oh yes, the Queen's English.
And it wasn't long before that, I think, that newsreaders had stopped wearing dicky bows and dinner jackets to read the news.
Even on the radio.
Even on the radio. Yes.